afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on enabling water smart communities. This is the second in the series, and the focus today is on values, and the title of the webinar is Water for People and Places. This webinar is being hosted by CIWEM. CIWEM is the Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management. We're a Royal Chartered professional body and independent charity. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get into the depths of the project. So this webinar is going to be recorded. If you've got any technical issues, please raise your hand and use the chat feature on Zoom to let us know what's going on. If you've got any questions, leave them to the end of the presentation and put your question or make a comment in the Q&A function of Zoom. So technical issues, use the chat function. For questions and comments about the content of the webinar, use the Q&A facility. Hopefully that makes sense. So into the Enabling Water Smart Communities project. So my name is Kat Moncrief and I'm at CIWEM, and I'm hosting today, and I'm joined by two speakers from Thames Water, John Hernon and Dayan Vernon. We're going to talk you through the values workstream of the Enabling Water Smart Communities project. And CIWEM's hosting this, as I said. CIWEM's role in the Enabling Water Smart Communities project is to lead on the communications and dissemination work. So I'm going to start by giving a quick introduction to the Enabling Water Smart Communities project. Apologies for those who joined the webinar yesterday, because this is going to be a little bit of a repetition, but I thought it was worth setting out the project briefly for those that couldn't join yesterday. So it's an innovation project and is exploring the relationship between integrated water management, community practices, and housing development. And its aim is to unlock opportunities for delivering water smart communities and ensuring long-term stewardship of water. The project is funded through the Transform stream of the Ofwat Water Breakthrough Challenge Fund. And you can see that there are many delivery partners involved, including water companies, academic and research institutions, and the Community Land Trust Network. We've also got an independent program board which guides the projects, and you can see lots of different organizations there, including developer organizations and relevant government bodies. So we have a lot of different input to this project, and it's a great partnership project for that reason. So what do we mean by a water smart community? So it's essentially where water efficient assets and systems like rainwater harvesting systems and sustainable drainage, where those things are included at the design stage of a development and built into the fabrication of a place. But it's also about the members of the community, and it's about them understanding, valuing, and taking ownership of those assets and systems, so that the value of water is enhanced and we cultivate more sustainable water use. And what do we mean by integrated water management? So John's going to talk about this in a bit more detail, but it's essentially about a holistic approach to water. So developing solutions that address those three sort of turquoise circles in the center of the diagram. So water supply deficit, flooding, and water pollution. And integrated water management is at the heart of the water smart communities concept. And it can happen at a number of different scales. That's what the diagram on the right-hand side is trying to demonstrate. So from individual dwellings and communities, where you might be collecting rainwater off roofs, through to strategic catchment and regional scale solutions. Now, despite well-established examples of integrated water management approaches internationally, we're yet to properly adopt it in England and Wales, and that's where the project comes in. Just a little bit about why we're doing this project. So what's the challenge we're really trying to address? So there are a number of shared challenges between the water and housing sectors in England and Wales. So you'll all be aware that the new government's very keen to build more homes, and it wants to build 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. But that housing growth is going to put more demand on water resources and wastewater systems. And that's going to make that demand is going to rise to an unsustainable level. And it's also going to significantly impact the water environment. And we're already seeing that happening. By 2050, we expect to be in water deficit if we don't do anything about this situation. We expect to be in a deficit of at least 4.8 billion litres of water per day. And that's a big number. It's quite hard to sort of visualize that, but it's over 2 million extra wheelie bins full of water per day that we're going to need. And areas such as Cambridgeshire and North Sussex are already running out of water. And as you can see from that map there from the Environment Agency, the whole of Eastern England is already classed as seriously water stressed. But at the other end of the extreme, flooding is becoming more prevalent, and we've seen that last winter and even in the last couple of weeks. According to research from the Climate Change Committee, at present 1.8 million people are living in areas of the UK at significant risk to flooding, and that's going to rise to between 2.6 million and 3.3 million, depending on the rise in temperature that we see. So the project's trying to look at these water challenges holistically. So it's identifying enablers to accelerate the uptake of smarter ways to manage rainwater and wastewater in new housing developments, so that these challenges around too much and too little water and too polluted water are addressed. And at the same time, we can unlock that housing growth that we really need to see. And this is sort of reflected in the project's vision. So that the project's vision is about accelerating the adoption of those integrated water management solutions in new developments, and through an approach that embraces long-term stewardship of water. Now, just very briefly, I want to introduce the enabling actions that the project is using. So we had an initial discovery phase of the project where we reviewed case studies, invited articles, and undertook various interviews to explore the various perspectives, challenges, and opportunities associated with water smart communities. And this phase also identified blockers associated with developing and adopting water smart communities and what needs to happen to remove or resolve those blockers. And we called those enabling actions. So these enabling actions were grouped according to 3 identified enabling principles for water smart communities. And those are value, assets, and stewardship. And today we're going to be focusing on enabling actions relating to values. And John will talk through that in a bit more detail. And here shows the kind of first set of enabling actions. We've done a first phase and we're moving on to a second phase. So this is the first phase of enabling actions. And you can see that they've been grouped under those enabling principles of value, assets, and stewardship. So John's going to talk more about water for people and places today, so I won't go into too much detail there. And then we've got a couple of other webinars on the assets enabling actions and then on the stewardship enabling actions. And the assets one is on I think it's the 22nd of October, and the stewardship webinar is on the 6th of November. So do sign up to those. And I'm going to pass over to John to kick off on his enabling actions.
Afternoon, everyone. John Hernon, Thames Water. My day job is a strategic development manager for Thames Water. I've been with the business now for 24 years, so lots of various roles across Thames Water, but probably the most exciting one I was involved in was the Olympic Park. So massive, great big project, and we had this fantastic black water treatment plant called Old Ford. Brilliant bit of kits, wonderful network that we built there, but unfortunately that system was switched off. So it was a 7-year research project, and after 7 years it was switched off, for a variety of reasons around getting the supply mix right, the economics, the energy costs, and so on. But big frustration from being involved in that project for a long time that we actually had to switch this project off, which ultimately was a real good enabler of a water smart community. So when the opportunity came up to join the Enabling Water Smart Community project, I jumped at it because I saw it as a chance that we can actually go and start to fix and look at some of these things and why things like the Olympic Park didn't work and how do we make these changes going forward. So what I'm going to run through today is I'll give you a bit of an introduction in terms of the wider challenge. Kat's already touched on quite a bit of that. I'm going to go through some different areas that we in Thames Water are leading on. So one is around a database of reuse schemes. We're going to do a deep dive into one of those particular schemes. We're going to look at integrated water management studies and also about the relationship between anchor institutes. I'll then pass on to Dayan, who's going to be doing he's involved in the second tranche of work that we're looking at, which is the impact of reduced flows to sewers. So from my perspective, I was initially thought, well, it's a bit of a pipe dream, isn't it? We're worried about, not enough flows going through sewers. And obviously over the last few days, you've seen the amount of, the volume of water that's been going into them. So, but it's a really important piece of work that we need to think about now because these changes take a long time to implement. So if you can move on to the next one, please, Kat. So Kat's already touched upon this, the big challenge. So this is how we kind of look at it. We've got population increase, we've got more and more homes being built, we've got lots of businesses growing, we're seeing the rise of data centers, carbon capture plants, all these important things in the environment. Demand is going up. We're seeing the environmental challenges, the abstraction licenses that we have are being reduced. All this is putting a lot of pressure on us. So what are we doing? We've got the big massive schemes, we've got the big reservoirs that are in the pipeline now. We've got all these new resources. We've got final effluent reuse schemes. As water companies, we're looking at smart metering. We're looking at how we reduce leakage. We're looking at water efficiency. So we need to do all of these things. It's not a case of picking the odd one here and there. We need to do them all, but we need to do more. And I think this is where this project starts to really start to drive some of these changes that we need, which are long-term changes. So if you flick on to the next one, please, Kat. So the first stream that we're looking at is a database of reuse schemes. So if you go on the next slide, Kat, initially when we started this project, there was a big focus at the start about building something new. Let's build some new demonstrator sites and look at different communities that are out there. How can we interact with social housing, private housing, water companies owning different schemes? And then we kind of reeled back a little bit and said, well, hold on a minute. Surely there's a lot of this stuff already out there. Why do we want to go and start trying to build something now? It will take a long time to go through the planning stage, to get built, to get commissioned, to get used, then to monitor that. Let's have an initial focus on what is already out there in existence. So the first task we did was to basically go out there and do loads and loads of research to try and find as many schemes as we could that related to water reuse schemes. So within this exercise, we focused on water reuse. So we haven't looked at SUD schemes and various other things. So we've gone out there and we found over 60 schemes where we believe we have water reuse in the UK. So we've done lots more investigation into that. And of those 60 plus schemes, we've identified 20 that we believe are still operational. So first thing we're looking at is, well, if there's, 1/3 of those operational, the other 2/3, what's happened to them? Why have they been switched off? Why are they not working? Why are they another mini Olympic park? So we need to go and look at that and research that. But also we really want to sort of hone in on those 20 schemes that we believe live and go in there and really start to look at some really potentially good case studies of where we've already got examples of reuse schemes across the UK. So we can start to understand how they operate, who operates them, how they're maintained, how they're looked after, and what are the benefits of those. So we've done all that research in the background. We've got lots and lots of data on all these different schemes. If you flick on to the next slide, Kat, what we're now thinking about is how we present that information. So there was an issue saying, right, we've got all this information, let's just get it out there. Let's put this out on our websites, and give people visibility of that. And again, we said, well, no, because again, what it feels from my perspective is, this is part of how water is probably undervalued. People will look at that, and then that becomes a stagnant bit of information on a website. We need to think about this more as a dynamic system that we can put up there. So we're now at the moment sort of in the look and feel thing. So what is this website going to look like? So we'll have an interactive map there. You can click on those different schemes, and there's an opportunity then we're aiming at to filter the information. So again, if you're a developer, you might be building a development in Manchester, 200 homes. You might be able to go onto this website and see a similar scheme somewhere else, and then you can understand what kit's been installed in that building, what the benefits are, what the size of that is, what are the challenges that are faced with that. Because what the information, a lot of the feedback we're getting from developers is, where do we go? So obviously, this is a big thing now in the UK. We're thinking about water reuse, but tell me how I get the kit. Where is it available? What's the benefit of doing it? What are the challenges around dual plumbing? What are the space constraints, and so on and so forth? So this is what we want this database to be. So rather than just being a flat, here's a list of schemes, we're going to have a look, that's great. We want to make sure this is more dynamic. Then we want to keep on adding to this scheme. So we want to add further information about the benefits of the scheme. So what is the actual water savings related to water reuse? Are there other schemes out there that we aren't aware of? How can we add those in? So it becomes more dynamic. And now we're also thinking about, well, this project's got a shelf life. We're looking to complete this project December 25. So how do we keep this running on so we don't just add to the pile of stuff that's out there and not fully utilized? So if you go on to the next slide, please, Kat. So these are sort of things. So they're phrase them as questions. I'm really just posing sort of ideas as we go through this webinar. So if anyone's got any other examples that they're aware of in the UK, please let me know. We hopefully have captured them on our list, but I'm pretty sure there's more out there that we're not aware of. So anyone's got any other great examples, please let us know. And also, do you think this database would be a good tool? And how can we enhance it? So if you're looking for something like this, what would you want to see on there, or what do you think? Or you're saying, do you think this already exists somewhere else? So that's the sort of thing we'd be interested to get your feedback on. So next area, if you go on to the next slide, please, Kat. So is around a deep dive into one of these particular examples. So South Bank Place. So this is up near Waterloo, directly opposite the London Eye. Very high value developments of about 1,000 apartments where the old Shell building was. And I've been involved in this project for a number of years in terms of getting their water mains connected and so on. So I was aware at the time that they had put in a reuse system. So it's a blended system. So you've got grey water, rainwater harvesting mixing in there. And then when I got involved in this project, I thought, I'll go and revisit that, see how they're getting on. And then basically I discovered that at South Bank Place, the system wasn't currently operational. So it's like, right, okay, that's not great, but as part of this exploratory exercise we're doing, let's try and do a deep dive into this and find out why things aren't working. What do we need to do to fix it? What are the challenges there? So I'm looking at South Bank Place now as almost like an end-to-end, cradle-to-grave approach, looking at water reuse. So the first sort of question I posed to the developer was, why? Why did you put this in the first place? Because there was no constraints from Thames Water in terms of saying you can only have a reduced amount of water, and they said it sort of sat around their sustainable objectives. It was the objective for this highly sustainable development on the South Bank, so that was the reason it was put in, and then planning conditions followed and so on. So that's the main driver for this scheme going in there. Why is it not operational now? And they said there's cross connections. So there's cross connections between the non-potable system and the foul, which obviously we need to get resolved and sorted out. And then we want to, so we're now in that phase of actually, what do we need to do to fix this? So we've got various meetings coming up because we want this system to operate, because we then want to move on to look at, right, well, once it's operational, how do you maintain the kit like this? What's the stewardship model for looking after this? How do you charge the end user for the water that's used for a reuse system? And then going on to the next phase, which is getting an understanding from the end users. What do they think about this particular system? And to be honest, at the moment they probably are not aware of this because it's not operational. So there's lots and lots of work to do in this particular scheme. It's in the heart of London, so we really want to kind of drive this on. So if you go on to the next slide, Kat, so we've got a plan now. We've got an action, what we need to do in terms of investigating the system failure, reinstating that system. We want to enhance the monitoring related to that system, because like a lot of reuse systems in the UK, they often get set up and they're monitored in a way that you monitor and you're told once the system fails. So how can we enhance that monitoring? And how can we get all different parties talking? Because, said in this system, you've got a rainwater harvesting system, you've got a grey water system, you've got a blowdown system for the commercial entity, and then they're not all talking to each other. So there's a really good opportunity, and something that I think we can add a lot of value to in this space. So if you go on to the next slide now, Kat. I think one of the things we want to think about there in terms of reuse, and this is where we can get these systems fixed and get a bit more knowledge about them, is what is the value to the end users? Because this is one of the nubs of it. We want to understand what the public think. The people that are living in these sort of type of apartments, do they care about the environmental benefit? Saving potentially 30% of water. Are they interested in saving money on their water bill? Or is there something else there? But we need to get the systems like Self Bank Place fixed and operational, so we can then go and start having those meaningful conversations with the end user. So that's the second piece of work that we're looking at the moment. The third piece is around comparisons of integrated water management studies and similar studies that are already out there. So again, working for Thames Water, I've been involved in 5 or 6 historic integrated water management studies that we've done for large catchments within our particular area. So Isle of Dogs, Old Oak Common, some really big areas. We've working with the GLA and other parties, we've instigated these big studies, and they've produced these really great big documents, loads of great information in there. And I've sort of said, from my perspective, I see these as really good potential documents, lots of good information, but they're not well used. So what's the point in us carry on producing these things if they're not really being, considered when we're coming to new developments? So, the vision for, from my perspective, an integrated water management study is to provide that sustainable vision for managing water and wastewater. Let's aim to achieve water neutrality and aim to achieve neutral discharge, reduce the risk of flooding, and provide an evidence base that can be used from local plans and other things that are similar. And what I found with these big documents that we had, they were hundreds of pages long. Well, they were not being used because they were so large. So, from my perspective, they need to be, we're aiming at the developer who's going to be building in these particular areas. So they need to be developer friendly, they need to be written in straightforward language, they need to be concise and specific to the area in question. So we don't need generic statements in there, about, how water cycles work and so on. They must highlight the challenges and constraints of developing in that particular area, because every single development site has its different challenges. So again, generic information doesn't really help. And they need to have some clear, tangible solutions. So there's something there for developers to aim at. So if you go on to the next slide. Okay, so we've gone out there and we found, again, lots and lots of these studies. So 45 of these different studies out there, and we started to go through and do some data mining in terms of all those studies. What does good look like? What do all these different ones contain? So we can actually start to develop kind of a clear understanding, a big research piece. The next key thing that we're now in the process of doing is going out there and doing an interview process. So we're now interviewing some of the key parties that were involved in producing these integrated water management studies. So a bit of a warts and all, tell us what you thought was good, tell us what you thought was bad. We want to understand, what's good and bad. We're then going to go on to do a series of workshops, and these workshops will be, different groups. So we'll have a group of developers around this. We'll have a group of local authorities. So we're going to be targeting different sectors so we can get their view on integrated water management studies, what they should be doing, and what they should be aiming at. And at the end of this, we want to produce a blueprint. So we want to say what we believe good looks like. We want to say what the good ingredients of an integrated water management study are, and how these can be scaled up, and how they can be tweaked for different areas. So again, because we just don't want to see the same things being repeated, all good documents, but not having a purpose. So the key thing from this study is to actually create that blueprint that can then be used across the UK from all other water companies, local authorities and others to actually use a blueprint for good going forward. You on to the next slide, please, Kat? And that's one of the sort of questions I've been posing, or I've been thinking about sort of when I've been involved in these in the past, is how do we make these things more impactful? Lots of them out there. So if anyone's got any ideas about how we make these more impactful, we're all ears. So the next one, please, Kat. So the final piece that I'm working on at the moment is around enhancing the relationship between anchor institutes. So the focus that I'm putting on here now is 3 anchor institutes: 1, water companies; 2 is local authorities; and 3 is developers. And what I see from a lot of the work that I do in my other role is, there's a bit of a disconnect between, we've all got great ideas and great priorities, but they're not all, we often work in silos. So what we've done over the summer is we've gone out and started speaking to local authorities in our particular geographical area of Thames Water, having some really good conversations, talking to them about what their plans are, what stage their local plans are at, what we're doing as Thames Water to try and drive sustainability. And we found there was a bit of a knowledge gap. We found that, yes, they knew what we're doing, and they've all got their own particular challenges, but they weren't fully aware of some of the stuff that we're doing in our space. So the next stage that we're doing here now with this particular work is we set a series of webinars, 2 webinars, focused purely on local authorities that operate within the Thames Water catchment area. We're running 2 webinars, one for local authorities in the London area, and then one for local authorities in the Thames Valley home county area. And we're focusing on 3 particular areas. We're focusing on our environmental incentives. So again, through conversations, a lot of local authorities were not aware of our environmental incentives that we currently offer to developers. So we see this as an opportunity of educating them around that. How can we then make sure that they are referencing our environmental incentives? And how can we help see that or use that to drive the uptake? Because obviously we've had our environmental incentives now coming up 2 years. We have seen a slight uptick in sort of demand for them, but we're still not where we want to be in terms of the number of people using these environmental incentives. And coming into AMP8, all water companies are going to have their environmental incentives. So we see that engagement with local authority as a really important step in trying to improve that, because again, we don't want to have a great incentive that's sat on a shelf and no one's using it. So again, because it's all about ensuring the value's there. Second piece we'll be talking about is around non-domestic use. So I mentioned previously about things like data centers. Currently, there's no obligation for water companies to provide water for non-domestic use. And again, through conversation with local authorities, that's something that some of them were not aware of. So we want to explain that to them. So we're all seeing, data centers and other things sort of popping up across the UK. So it's something they need to be made aware of, because we're having some very challenging conversations with these companies that need potentially large volumes of water, and we're trying to protect the amount of water that we got available to support growth and new homes. And obviously this is an additional challenge on top of that. So that's the second area we'll be focusing on. The third piece is around Schedule 3 and our views on how Schedule 3 might be managed once it comes in. And obviously it's been talked about now for a year or so. So we're hoping potentially next year that might be coming in. So it's just Dan Rees from our team will actually give an overview of that. So that webinar series, again, aimed solely at local authorities, and that will be happening at the end of October. But again, this is all about how we're trying to kind of close the gap between ourselves and other anchor institutes so we can be more aligned. So on the back of those webinars, we're hoping to see more interaction, more collaboration between ourselves. And then that will then lead on to a conversation with developers, because again, all the developers I speak to have got some great sustainable objectives, and we just need to make sure those 3 parties are all really well aligned. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Kat. So, and again, another kind of question we're sort of posing in, one thing I'm thinking about is how to improve the links between water companies, planning and developers. And I think if we can do something in that space, I think there's some really big wins there. So that's the 4 areas I've covered. So what I'm going to do is pass you on to Dayan now, who's going to be talking about the next stage of the project, which is understanding the impact of reduced water on our sewage system. Over to you, Dayan.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Vernon. I'm a technical manager at Thames Water. Most of my time at Thames Water, I've been working on wastewater networks research. And one of the issues that keeps coming back over the years is septicity within our network, where either the sewage is stored for a prolonged period or the oxygen is depleted, and it can cause issues within the network, such as corrosion or odor problems. So when this project came up, I was keen to be involved. Next slide, please. So A little bit about this project. So I'm working with this project with Olivia Lee from Arup. So keep co-leading it, and what it's going to do is going to look into what will be the impacts of wide-scale water reuse on the sewer network. So lots of the wastewater assets we use are 50, 100 years old, and they're based on water usage at the time. If we're going to use considerably less water than we do at the moment, the concentration of that wastewater is going to change, and the flows. So it's going to impact the way the sewer network operates in terms of blockages and the movement of solids and nutrients within there, and potentially the temperature, but also downstream, how would it impact the sewer treatment works? And as John mentioned, while we're not at that point now with water reuse, a lot of these assets take a long time to plan and to rebuild. So as these projects start to come forward, this work stream is going to give the tools to the people planning the projects to ask the right questions and to do assessments of what they think may be the impact. And there'll be good and bad, obviously. So there's potentially more capacity in the sewer, but then potentially impacts to how how sewage moves through the network. Next slide, please. So there's 4 main tasks within here. So Olivia Bailey from Arup, her PhD was based on exactly this topic. So what would be the impact of water reuse on the sewer network? And she adapted an open source model from KWR. And so the first task will be to synthesize her PhD into an easy to use pamphlet, update that with the learnings for the last 5 years since she completed that work, and have a number of workshops and user groups to try and understand the needs of the information that people would want. And that will be the content of the pamphlet. The open source model, currently it's in a format that can't be run on compatible modeling software. So one of the tasks will be to have it coded in a format that can be used with InfoWorks. So modeling that's done by water companies and others at the time, this could be integrated in there to so people can do assessments. The second task is, once that model is in that format, we'll run the model lots and lots of times to get a large bank of scenarios, so that upfront you could do an assessment of what a scheme would have. You could do an assessment quickly upfront at a low cost, what the impact of these type of things are going to have. So effectively, it will group model runs already that are run and pull them down, so that if a developer or a water company trying to do water efficiency measures, they can pull this down and try and get an idea upfront without spending a huge amount of time on it. The third bit would be try and take some modeling scenarios from existing sewage treatment works and overlay on what the impact of water efficiency will be, and see how it affects the performance of the wastewater treatment and which elements are likely to suffer the most. And we're planning to do 3 different scales of sewage treatment works, so a large London works, and then 2 others across the country, and hopefully one will be from each of the companies involved. So one will be a United Utilities one, and one will be an Anglian one. And the final bit will be to do a sort of design optimization proof of concept. So this will kind of describe how this may change design tools in the future. Next slide, please, Kat. So, as I said, it's going to be quite an iterative process. So, as we move through here, this may change somewhat. But the key bit is going to be the stakeholder management at the start, to try and understand people's needs for the pamphlet and also the tools that we're developing. And then that will feed into all of the next tasks to ensure that they have the most impact. Next slide, please. And this is just an overview of the of what the outputs are going to be. So you know, we'll have workshops to understand them. We're going to have a pamphlet and a design solution for the tool in the second part, and in the third task we're going to have a report which will outline the potential impacts, and then the fourth bit will be a technical note with a proof of concept on sewer design. Next slide, please, Kat. And this is just showing everyone involved in this. So this is led by myself and Olivia Bailey. Are delivering the first two tasks with support from KWR, and then the third task is going to be run by Thames Water and WSP, and then fourth by Arab. But the other partners, Anglian and EU, will be involved all the way through. Next slide, please, Kat. I think that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. So just before we move into the questions, I just wanted to share some of the ways that this project is kind of engaging and communicating with others. So because it's an innovation project, we're trying to share our insights and findings as much as we can as we go along. And we really want to encourage a wider network of professionals. So all you guys and all of your connections, we want to involve you in the development of the concepts. And there's lots of ways to do this. So we're regularly posting project updates on our LinkedIn account. And we also post our sort of takes or perspectives on different things going on in the news and the external world that are relevant. We're also trying to publish our research insights as we go along. So we're doing that with easily accessible blogs, and we're posting them on our Medium site. We're also going to start using our Notion platform to share our work in progress and gain feedback. And both the Medium platform and the Notion platform can be accessed through the project's website. And of course, we've got this current webinar series, and you can see there the next one's coming up. So we've got one focused on our academic research into community engagement and perspectives on water. That's not next week, but the week after on the 16th of October. Then we've got one focused on our assets work stream, and particularly on-site water reuse, and that will be led by George Warren at Anglian Water. That's on the 22nd of October. And then the last one in the series is focusing on the concept of water stewardship and a community-led approach to water stewardship. That is on the 6th of November and being led by Stuart Edwards from United Utilities. So please do sign up. The link for signing up is there. So yes, please do go in there. And also feel free to engage us and email us if we can't answer your questions or today, or with any thoughts that you have, particularly in response to all those questions that John posed. And on the next slide there, I've put in John and Dayan's email addresses there, so you can contact them directly. Great, so we've got a bit of time for some questions now. There's been a fair amount of activity in the Q&A, which is great. Thank you for engaging. Quite a few questions for John. So John, Rebecca's got several questions. The first one is the interactive map of the case studies already available to view? I can answer that it's not yet available, it's in development. And is it going to include retrofitting private homes? I wasn't sure whether we had any case studies on that.
I don't think we've got any case studies on that, but if you've got examples of that, because that's another area we are thinking about, because obviously, you know, we said at the start, focus primarily on new developments, but that retrofit opportunity is huge. So we're really keen, and we're working with other parties, Hydroloop and so on, to explore where, you know, there's retrofit, refurbs and other things that we can take in there. So any examples you got there, we haven't got, I don't think, many examples of that. It's primarily focused on the new build world, but anything anyone's got with more than kings, I think say it's something that we are really actively looking at.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And she also asks, with South Bank, how will it work out? Oh, how will you work out what the end users are charged? So how is that going to work?
This is one of the challenges around reuse. So we've got smart meters on South Bank Place. So every single apartment, every single commercial entity within South Bank has got a smart meter, which is charged for their potable water and us taking that waste away. At the moment, this is one of the conversations I have, when that system's operational, what are you going to charge for it? Now, is that a charge that's a volumetric charge? Probably difficult because there aren't individual meters on each feed for each apartment. So does it then become part of a management fee? So how do you do that? And again, that is one of the challenges around water reuse, which is how you charge for it. What is the economic model to enable a system like South Bank to remain operational? Because if it's costing the person who's running that building money to maintain that system, there's more of a chance of it being switched off. So that is one of the key things we want to look at this development is how do you create an economic, well, not so someone can make a load of money and rip people off, but it's how can you do something where yes, there's still a saving, but there's enough there to enable that system to operate.
Yeah, it's a good question. Caroline Hogg said she met you in 2020, John.
I remember, yeah.
Aqua Gratis Micro Domestic Grey Water Reuse System. We've continued to develop it. It gives great environmental impacts in one hit. So that's really a comment rather than a question. I don't know if you want to say anything in response to that, John.
Yep, I remember meeting. Yeah, and we talked about their scheme, and I think we met with a large developer as well at the time. So yeah, really interested to see how they're developing. Obviously, we mentioned Hydroloop is another person that operates, or another company that operates in that particular area. But I think the product we saw then was really there's opportunity in new development and also in the retrofit world. I know they were developing another product that was kind of akin to working in hotels as well. So again, we're all ears in terms of all these different opportunities out there. So yeah, obviously my details there. So yeah, please contact me again and we can have some more conversations in regards to that particular product.
Great. And then back onto retrofit, Rebecca's asking, does Thames Water have any grey water or rainwater schemes or support retrofitting to homeowners?
Not that I'm aware of. Obviously, I mentioned the Olympic Park that we had, which is obviously it's a Blackwater reuse scheme that's still there, but unfortunately not operational. But I'm not aware of anything else. We were involved with other projects, and Dan might know more about BedZ and other things that are out there. So again, these are all kind of things that have been researched and then they sort of fallen away a little bit. So you got anything, Dan?
I don't think, no, we've not got anything that's operational.
Mm.
Instead, we've had previous research projects, but nothing currently operational.
And in terms of retrofitting these things into new homes, does Thames Water offer any support for that?
So in terms of new homes, we've obviously got our environmental incentives. So this is what,
yeah,
that's new, but for existing, so there is the opportunity. So how our environmental incentives work is around, we want developers to install really good, efficient products. We then want to think about reuse as that intervention piece. The third piece is around kind of like the offset strategy. So what's left over, what can we offset to bring a new development down to that water neutrality aim, which is what we're all aiming at. And that's where we go into existing housing stock. So we do that smarter homes and smarter business visits. So that's what we do already offer. As it stands at the moment, we often where we got our progressive metering program, so we've installed over 1 million meters. We often, in those areas where we're installing smart meters, we'll go and target those areas or other areas that we know have got high volumes of leakage. So we do offer that from a visits perspective, but there's not at the moment incentive to incentivize existing housing stock to introduce reuse.
And she's asked whether you can say anything about the cost to individual householders for retrofitting.
that's something that George will probably pick up in his webinar in terms of the overall asset costs. And that again is one of the big challenge we face, which is how much these systems cost to install. What is the the physical cost of installing? What is the installation cost? What is the ongoing maintenance costs? And also what is the impact in terms of space? Because again, I'm in London, we speak to developers about this. Space is a huge thing. Putting an extra pipe in, putting an extra system in the basement, which is going to lose a few parking bays. These are all significant costs associated to them. So it's something that we're really trying to unpick and unravel as part of this project, which is those kind of myths around what does these systems cost. We've set up our own environmental incentives to try and be as generous as we think we can in terms of trying to encourage developers to actually look at reuse. And the things we're offering now, I think as developers now saying, well, there is potentially some good benefit there, but there's lots and lots of work to happen in this space, because every single scheme there is different challenges, and there will be different costs. So we are doing what we can to try and get more understanding of what the overall cost associated to reuse is.
Yeah. And there was a question about what those environmental incentives are for developers. I think maybe just touched on that, but maybe just clarify for everyone present.
Yeah, so there's a total for every new dwelling that a developer produces, there is a potential saving of £2,500. So that's if you put in water efficient products that get you, using the Part G calculator, that gets you to what we want in terms of water demand. So we are fully aware of that. You can't, by putting in good products, you're not changing people's behaviours, but at least you're having a fighting chance by making sure that the developer is installing good products. Once you've demonstrated that you've got those in, we then move to the water reuse, or what we're looking at is we want developers to demonstrate that a new development is using water reuse to flush toilets within that development. So that's the tier 2 of that environmental incentive. And tier 3 is the offset strategy. So we can work with developers on that. So we can actually go and do those smarter home, smarter business visits, do that final offset. But in totality, if you can get to that third piece, it's £2,500. So it works. I think it's £400 to get tier 1, good products. Tier 2, I think it's around, it's another £600 to get up to £1,000. Oh, sorry, it takes you up to £2,000. So, and then to do that final piece, you get up to £2,500. I need to go and look at it, but what we're offering to developers is £2,500 per dwelling to get to that water neutrality perspective.
Okay. And is that set to change, John, when the new building regulations come in? Carolyn's asked what happens when you've got, in April 2025, when you get 110 litres per person per day coming in.
Yeah, we're not, so it won't. So again, come AMP8 or 2025, all water companies will be offering environmental incentives. So what we're just all looking at now is how we set that. We've also got the water labelling that's going to come in 2025, which should, again, that almost covers our tier 1 of the environmental incentives, which is around making sure that developers are picking the right products. And that's what we want developers to focus on, is getting those right products in there. And then we can then start having those conversations about the behavioural challenges that we face. Because, regardless of what something's installed, we can't, influence how people use water in the home. So that's the kind of next tier on that. But I think with the all water companies introducing environmental incentives, we want to try and ensure as much consistency as possible across the UK. Obviously there's different challenges in different parts, but also we all believe that water labelling will have a really big positive impact on new developments going forward.
Yeah. Rebecca also asks whether local residents can get involved in your workshops. I think she's referring to the workshops around anchor institutions and environmental incentives.
Yeah, at this stage, I don't think, and I think this is one of our challenges. What I want to do, and as part of this work that we want to do, is we want to get to that end user. We want to get to the public and get their views and opinions on water reuse and what they think of it. And at the moment, we're not seeing enough of those systems, and we're not seeing how those systems are operating and run. So that's why places like Southbank, we're really super keen to get those operational, get them running again, so we can actually talk to the end users about a live scheme rather than a theoretical model. So, and that's when I think, so yes, we do really want to engage the public, but I just think at the moment we still got a bit of a way to go before we can have some meaningful conversations.
Sure. Question from Vera about how the water will be treated for reuse. Is the plan to reuse water for every use, including drinking?
No. So it is, we are focusing primarily on using reuse water for toilet flushing. So there's opportunities, with washing machines and other things like that, but our focus at this point is let's aim at toilet flushing. None of us, you have conversations, a lot of the public don't kind of even often make that connection that they are flushing drinking water down the toilet. So that needs to be our primary driver on this. Yes, in the future there'll be other opportunities, but we're looking at there's different schemes. There's those individual units that can go in the home. There's the communal systems that can sit at the bottom of a apartment block, or there's a communal system where you can have a network, a bit like we had on the Olympic Park, that feed an entire estate. So there's different systems operational, but the focus is really on trying to eradicate water or potable water being used to flush toilets.
Yeah. There's also a question about how much water meters are saving in London, and how many homes have meters in Thames Water. What percentage of homes in Thames Water's area have
percentage? We've got 1 million smart meters now being installed. We've got a plan to install another 1 million in the next 5 years. So, but we kind of went out early because we knew how stressed water was in London. So we focused on London initially. So that's where we've been running this project for a long time now. So we've started to see some really good data, and we're seeing a high percentage of our customers are efficient with water, but we've got kind of what we're classing as a long tail of customers that just use ridiculous amounts of water. So we're starting now to really kind of delve into that insight that we're getting in terms of demands associated with that. By having smart meters, I think, again, don't quote me even though it's being recorded, I think it's about, we're seeing about 15% saving of through the benefits of smart metering, because we're able to identify and target. So if someone's got what we deem as a leaky loo, which might be a little dribble of water going constantly down the back of the pan, and we can see that via the smart meter data. So we can see that that meter doesn't stop running. It's running throughout the night. So we can then alert that customer to say, look, we think you might have a problem here. Either you are using water for the night, or there's something within the home. And if it's not within the home, is there an issue between the communication pipe as it enters your home and our smart meter? So it's enabling us now to start targeting what we're deeming as customer side wastage. So some really big benefits there. I think all water companies, if you look at sort of the plans for the next 5 years, pretty much all of them are going to be sort of doing a big campaign now in terms of targeting the introduction of smart meters.
Thanks, John. Question here on skills, which is probably quite relevant for SciWEM as well. So this is from George. Drawing parallels from the energy sector, where the challenge is to get electricians trained and certified to install prosumer technologies like solar panels and battery storage, are you looking at how similar skill sets are needed for this? For example, formal training or certification pathways are needed for professionals to gain confidence in, install and maintain water reuse systems, rainwater harvesting, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a really good.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is this something that George is looking at to some extent through the roadmap for water reuse?
I think there's elements of it, but I think we need to do more in that space because there is a big gap. So we're really trying to push this, but there's not that many companies in the UK that offer the kit that we want for reuse. And obviously they're small companies now with a limited number of engineers, and that is going to be one of the challenges. So if we start to see a big uptick in people wanting this and they're then putting their kit further away, we need to get more engineers trained up, because if the engineers aren't trained up and there is an issue with these systems, they get clogged up with hair or whatever, what they'll then do is they'll stop and now they'll flip to the possible backup system that's in place. And therefore, then we're back to the same sort of status quo of possible water being used to flush toilets. So there is a big upskilling. We need to look at the supply chain here in a large context to understand who has got the capability. If it was mandated tomorrow that all new developments had to be water neutral, or all new developments had to have reuse, then we probably haven't got the skills, the technology, or the stock available to do that. So it's something we need to think about. It's probably something, again, for sort of the tranche 2 of projects we're looking at this project, we need to think about, because they are going to be some big challenges. So yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah, good point. I think probably our final question, you mentioned Hydroloop. What other grey water systems are out there for domestic use? So I think Carolyn mentioned one earlier up in the chat, which was Aqua Gratis.
Yep, that's one of the other ones. There's a few. We've got Aquality, SDS, Graft, Storm Saver, some really good companies out there doing some really, really good things. And apologies, I don't know them all, but again, there isn't that many more than I've just mentioned. So, and that is one of the big challenges we face is, it's about giving that availability and the choice to developers, and then giving that scaling up. So I think there is a gap. We need more of them, but we also need to make sure that I'd love these companies to come and say, "Oh God, we literally can't do any more because we're being absolutely inundated," and they are getting inundated with inquiries. But off these inquiries, we want to make sure they turn into actual projects.
Good. Well, those are all the questions that we had in the chat. Thank you. Lots for John. No one's got any wastewater questions. maybe next time. But thank you very much, and thank you to John and Dayan for talking through what you're up to. That was a really nice deep dive into the values work stream. Please do think about those questions that John posed as he went through the presentation, because we really do want to hear about what people think. So what kind of other case studies are out there that maybe we haven't been in touch with yet? Do you think that kind of database that John shared would be useful, and how can we make it more useful to people working in the sector? Anyone with experience of working with integrated water management studies and reports, any thoughts on how those can be improved going forwards and made more useful so they're not just dusty documents on a shelf? And any further ideas, sort of general ideas about how you think water companies, developers and local authorities can work together in order to get these types of reuse systems installed and really delivering value. So I will wrap up there. Thank you very much, and do keep in touch.
Thank you.
Cheers then. Bye.